It was the same. Two twins with dyed hair approached and asked who dared to pick on their people. Someone exclaimed that the brothers called the double horns of the black dragon had arrived. The guy wouldn't dare lift a finger in front of their cool combinations. Lloyd crossed his arms and attacked with a double slap. He walked up to the boy who had just been extolling the virtues of the twins and gave him a lymphatic drainage massage to his face. The other two students, who had been laughing at first, cowered and hid their faces in the table. Trembling, they muttered that they hadn't said anything. The brown-haired man loomed over them and reminded them that they had left. One swing, and the Tooth Fairy got two new trophies. Rakona's son, with his teeth knocked out, swung and struck him in the face. He bared his teeth and asked how he liked the mana blow delivered by such a brilliant fighter. Diego Rakona, 21. The boy stared ahead, dumbfounded. Later, the young man regretted it. The hero licked the blood from his face and laughed ominously. That blow was clearly not worth delivering. Lloyd bared his teeth and, grabbing the student by the chest, hit him hard with his head. The blonde went limp in his arms. The aristocrat lifted the bully up, and he begged him to stop. The hero repeated the move right in the forehead. Julian looked at his brother with concern and thought that he had completely lost his mind. What an idiot the boy was, even for a second thinking that he was normal. The child turned to the place where the deputy director stood, but there was no one there anymore. Lloyd slammed Diego into the wall. He smirked and muttered that the boy must not understand what was happening and why he was being beaten. The brown-haired man pressed the victim tighter and mimicked his words about Viscount Rakona. The student muttered that he had crossed the line by insulting his parents. The hero thoroughly wiped the wall with the boy's face and shouted that he had no special position to mock others. He knocked on the wall with Diego's face and asked why he had to teach such simple things to an ill-mannered cretin. All because the blonde doesn't have someone next to him who will beat the crap out of him every time. The aristocrat pointed to the bloody trace of his face on the wall and asked what it looked like. The next second, he hit the guy again, saying that this is the 66th gate of hell for such trash who wastes oxygen in vain. Julian grabbed his brother and asked him to stop right now, otherwise he will kill the student. The boy closed his eyes and wondered why he was covering for him at all, because it will be worse for him later. He looked up at his brother, who asked if the kid was really afraid that he would be bullied even more later. Lloyd smiled and asked him not to worry, because a corpse couldn't hurt him. Julian turned pale, not understanding why the guy looked like he was proud of himself. The hero punched the bully in the stomach and thought that in high school he saw enough bastards like that who did whatever they wanted. He rejected any form of mercy for him. The blonde coughed. After all, the fear of death was something special. The voice ordered to stop immediately. The guards surrounded them. The man frowned and exclaimed that this was a sacred academy, which was under the patronage of Her Majesty the Queen, and this was treason. The hero straightened up, holding Diego by the hair. Julian looked at him in fear, wondering if his brother was capable of attacking the dean too. The brown-haired man bowed and introduced himself. The boy frowned, not understanding why he was so calm, as if he was preparing for this. Lloyd smiled and bowed, apologizing for causing such a commotion. He looked slyly at the dean and said that he was only restoring the trampled honor of Her Highness. The man frowned and replied that this was nonsense, and who would dare to defame the honor of the queen. The guy replied that it was Rakon's son who did it, and his younger brother suffered from bullying and insults. The hero looked at the deputy, who had seen everything, and asked if he really had nothing to say. The man began to sweat while the brown-haired man was telling him that he had no desire to stop him. They didn't need to understand why he hadn't stopped. It was because the staff of this academy was recruited on the recommendations of the nobility. That's why they didn't want to see anything except these very nobility. So the students felt free and dared to behave as they wanted. Those who grew up here and brought the academy to such madness. And it's not just the students, the teachers are good too. The men looked at him tensely. The hero thought that he would never have stayed away if he had learned that Julian was being bullied. He hadn't paid attention to them until now, since he was just the son of a poor baron, so there was little point in his helping. The boy narrowed his eyes and thought that by insulting his younger brother, they had insulted him. The dean frowned and asked what this had to do with Her Majesty. Lloyd put his hand in his pocket and said that by insulting his brother, they had insulted him. He took out and opened the object. The academics stared at it in shock. The brown-haired man smiled and said that it was a special royal pass for an important guest. Suddenly, even a glow engulfed him, and everyone knelt down, saluting the queen. The hero put his hands in his pockets and headed for the exit, since they understood what had just happened here. The dean narrowed his eyes and thought that this retarded idiot did not know that the status of a royal guest extended to only one person. They could punish Julian after he left. The man shuddered, looking at the boy. The hero grinned menacingly. The dean quickly lowered his head and thought that he was trying to say that he would finish him off if he pulled some trick. Lloyd looked at his brother and hurried him. They walked down the corridor together. The boy glanced sideways at the hero and asked where they were going. The brown-haired man replied that they needed to go to the administrative center so that the young man could take an academic leave. He turned around in surprise at his brother, who had stopped. Julian frowned and asked how far he was going to go to satisfy his ego. Now they would put even more pressure on him at the academy, and he wouldn't be allowed to study either. The other man smiled and replied that it would be hard for him to study in such an environment anyway, so he should cool down and start training. Lloyd grinned and said that there was a saying that the best way to build muscles was through physical labor. Night had fallen on the royal palace, the rooms of important guests. Xavier looked at the boy sitting opposite him and asked him to think about Mr. Lloyd's advice because it would lead to good results. The child objected that it was about his good-for-nothing brother. The knight looked at his interlocutor intently and asked if he didn't trust his words either. Julian stared at him in surprise. The swordsman told him that the hero had single-handedly dealt with a mega titan and even withstood a deadly blow. The aristocrat had built a road and a water supply system, and had also started mining coal in the mines and made friends with wild orcs. The young man listened in shock. The knight added that Lloyd had managed to pay off most of the baron's unbearable debt, and had achieved all this single-handedly. The warrior looked at the boy and asked him to trust him. Now it was his older brother who ran the estate. The hero froze in the hallway, reaching for the door handle. He rubbed his nose in embarrassment, hearing the knight's words. Julian sat down on the couch and replied that he really wanted to believe his words, but it was hard to accept that this alcoholic and asshole had changed so much. The interlocutor agreed that the gentleman was stupid and arrogant. The child said that his brother was real trash. The swordsman added that it was hard to believe that he was even human. Lloyd froze with an empty look. The student looked at the knight and asked if it was possible for someone to change so much. The blonde replied that it was impossible. Xavier frowned and said that he thought that this person was someone else, just looked like Mr. Lloyd. The hero frowned. There was a pause. The boy looked at the interlocutor in surprise and asked if someone was using his brother's body with black magic. The knight closed his eyes and replied that it could be so, if such a thing was even possible. The brown-haired man frowned as the swordsman explained that there was such a theory in the book, but in order to transfer a soul to another body, a very large amount of mana was required. He secretly decided to test it. Xavier said that Lloyd's soul was connected by a very strong flow of mana. The hero opened his mouth, surprised that the warrior actually did this. The student frowned and asked if the soul of another was there. The brown-haired man narrowed his eyes, waiting for an answer. The knight closed his eyes and said that the body and soul felt natural, as if one whole. The nobleman sighed in relief. The swordsman looked at the boy and noted that these were just stupid assumptions. The child objected that it was even more stupid to think that he had changed so much. The hero stared ahead and thought that there was no way in hell that Xavier could not sense his presence behind the door. He must have wanted the master to hear it. The boy shuddered when he heard his younger brother say that he knew about the family's debts. The boy looked away and muttered that he thought he was the only one trying hard. All this time, his brother had done so much to cover the debt. It was easier for a child. Julian smiled and said that he had to admit that his older brother had saved their estate. Notification: Julian's sympathy towards you has increased by 2 points. Bonus RP received 28. Sympathy towards you minus 59. The hero grinned and thought that he could get points for his brother too. The system wrote that the ice in the little brother's heart had cracked. The boy replied that it was time to move on. He entered the room and told his brother that it was time to begin. Lloyd smiled and reminded him that he had promised training. The first step was to prepare the suspension cables of the bridge. The nobleman pounded the shovel to crush the soil and knead the pizza dough a meter thick. The second step: finish preparing the pizza by throwing in other types of soil and rocks as ingredients. The third step was to feed everything to Belle. The fourth step was to release the steel from the snake passage. The fifth step was to roll the steel into 120 bundles of wires using pipodong when the steel cooled. The rope was complete. The hero handed his brother a shovel and said that that was it. He pointed and said that this process was the starting point of the entire construction.